think. We've covered lots of interesting topics all across the realm of sustainability, so from things like embodied carbon to recycling to retrofit, and then last month's session we had on urban farming. What we really want to get out of these sessions is to just get people thinking and talking about some of these topics that you might not have had the opportunity to really have had a conversation about before, and then hopefully change the way that we all think or act about certain things, either in our work lives or outside of work, day-to-day lives. So today's session we're going to be talking about sustainable periods, and we're lucky enough to have been joined by Fee and Ella, who Fee is from TOTM, who are a sustainable and organic menstrual product company, and Ella is an environmental activist and founder of the End Period Plastic campaign. It's a really inspiring campaign all around how we can make periods more sustainable, but also having a lot of really good links in with how we can look at ending period poverty and support people to have just generally a better experience when we're having our periods, as most of us probably in this session today will be experiencing them every month or so. So it's something that obviously is an important topic and impacts like a lot of us. So I think really important conversation for us to be having, and something that we don't necessarily get a lot of opportunities or feel that we're able to talk about a lot. So hopefully this will be a really interesting session for lots of you. In terms of like format of the session, so I think we're going to have a presentation probably about 20 minutes, half an hour or so, but then we'll have lots of time at the end for questions. So there'll be an opportunity to either come on camera and put your hand up and ask a question straight up, or put it in the chat, or if you don't feel comfortable asking a question, then feel free to drop me a private message and I'm happy to ask questions on anyone's behalf. But yeah, hopefully we can just have like a nice conversation, keep things very like open, and feel like this is a safe space to ask any questions that you've been wanting to ask about. Just in terms of like usual housekeeping and stuff, so session's going to be recorded and uploaded onto YouTube and our website after, just so everyone's aware, but also means that if you miss any of it or if you want to share it with anyone else, then we can send a link out after. And then usual stuff, if you're not speaking or asking questions, we could just stay on mute, just so that the sound isn't all disrupted. But yeah, I think that's all from me. So yeah, welcome Fee and Ella, and thank you for joining us. I will stop sharing these slides and swap over, and I'll let you two start off.
Lovely, thank you so much. Should I share from my side? Does that all work? I already arranged with Ella. I said I'll be the master of the slides. We're going to do the tag team job. I'm just going to grab it for you. There we go. Can everybody see that? Any thumbs?
I can see that.
I can see, yeah.
Perfect. I'm just going to make it obviously a bit bigger so we can get a full screen mode. There we go. Perfect. So I'll just start with introducing myself. So obviously just following that great introduction anyway. I'm Fee, so I'm head of marketing at TOTM. And obviously we're here with Ella Daish. And obviously, as mentioned previously, Ella is an award-winning environmental activist and also the founder of the End Period Plastic campaign. So with this structure, because obviously Ella's campaign is so inspiring and there's so much around that, Ella's going to kind of take the lion's share when it comes to going through all of that and explaining this industry. And obviously I'll kind of come in as and when and join in more heavily on the discussion side of it. So without further ado, I shall hand you over to Ella.
Hi, thanks so much for having me speak and for the lovely words. My name's Ella. I'm an environmental activist, and all of this has been a bit of a whirlwind for me, if I'm honest. You know, before I started this petition, I wasn't an environmental activist. I didn't have any campaigning experience. I didn't really know what I was doing. But when I found out about this problem, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So for me, it all began back in 2018 when I was a postal worker for Royal Mail. And I began to notice how much was being thrown away each week on my route. Now, this was just a few streets in Cardiff where I was working at the time, but it really made me think about what was being thrown away on a national scale. And I started to make switches myself. So I was using a reusable water bottle, washable makeup wipes. I was feeling super positive about the changes that I was making. But then my period started. And I'd never really thought about it before, in the sense of what we waste while we're on our period. And seeing this basket this bin just pile up with single-use plastic during that menstrual cycle, really, it was that first step to realizing how much plastic is actually in them. So after I looked at that, I did some online research, and I was horrified to find out that the products I'd been using for years could contain up to 90% plastic. And I think it's something that a lot of us are shocked about. You know, when I was talking to my friends and family about it, they reacted with the same surprise. And I think that has a lot to do with how we're educated at school about these issues. You know, we find out about periods through a very short lesson, and sometimes it's not even really, you can't really call it a lesson because you don't learn that much, but you get handed branded products, and they're the ones that contain plastic, and you get that brand loyalty from such a young age, and you don't really question what you're using. So as I said, I've spoken to family and friends, they didn't know either. And I went into my local supermarket to get an alternative option, thinking, hey, I can do something, I can switch to an eco-friendly product. But the problem was, I got into that supermarket, looking up and down the shelves, there was no choice. It was either plastic or plastic. And that really frustrated me, because as an individual, as a lot of you will know, a lot of the time the pressure is put on us to change. And there was nothing to allow that to happen, you know, where these mainstream products are, there was no choice. And if we haven't got that choice, how can we truly make a decision about what we buy? We can't. So all of this was going around in my head. I made the switch to eco-friendly products, and I thought, you know, someone else will do something about it. I didn't really want to have to do anything at the time. So I carried on with my job, doing my round, but the issue just kept rolling around my head. It just didn't make any sense to me that, one, we're using a material like plastic, which is so durable, for a product that we're using for just a few hours. And two, that if small eco-friendly brands like Time of the Month could make them without plastic, then so could the big brands too. And there was no excuse for them not to do it. I didn't really know what I as an individual could do at the time, but I knew I had to do something, because if I didn't, then who would? And thankfully, I saw the success of other online campaigns by young women, like Laura Corrigan's tampon tax petition and Amika George's one to end period poverty. And that inspired me to take a stand against period plastic by starting my own, which is how this all began. And you might be thinking, why are we even talking about period products? Like, what's so bad about them? The problem is that this plastic conversation is so dominated by the normal things like bags, bottles, and straws. But period products are the 5th most common item found on Europe's beaches. They're even more commonly found than straws or coffee cups, which just goes to show how much of a global issue they are. And we're finding a lot of these products even ending up on Scottish beaches, Cornwall's beaches, and they're not even from the UK, because you can tell which brand the tampon applicator is from, and they've come all the way from North America across the sea. It just shows how far this plastic pollution can travel. Now, when you've used a tampon or pad, obviously at that point, it's already come from the fossil fuel industry because of their high content of plastic. But after being disposed of, they contribute to being incinerated, they get sent to landfill, but they also pollute the environment. And it's estimated that around 50% of users actually dispose of them incorrectly down the toilet, which then puts the pressure on our water systems, and they end up being pushed out into the environment, into our waterways, and end up on our beaches. And this is a real problem because when they get there, they never really break down. They only get smaller. And I think that's one of the things that really concerns me is the unseen. It's the fact that these products are breaking down into microplastics and fibres that are smaller than 5 millimeters. And then that's getting into our food chain. So even crabs in the River Thames have been found with period plastic in their stomach from pads. They've actually been consuming it because there's so many pads that are getting through into the Thames and then sinking to the bottom of the river. So why am I doing this? I mean, I focus on brands because, as I said before, a lot of the time when it comes to the plastic debate and the conversation, a lot of the blame is put onto us as consumers. You know, we're told to change, but these manufacturers and supermarkets have got the money and they've got the power to really influence change from the top, and it can affect change so widely as well. So to date, the campaign has got almost 250,000 signatures, and it's leading to changes all the time. So thankfully, 4 brands have committed to removing their plastic applicators from their products. That's Aldi, Lillet, Sainsbury's and Superdrug. And by them doing that, that saves over 28 tonnes of plastic each year. And many more are making changes by bringing in eco-friendly ranges as well, which is fantastic. And a lot of those supermarkets that I was talking about before that didn't used to stock those different choices are now stepping out, and they're bringing in brands like TOTM, they're bringing in eco-friendly tampons and pads, and they're bringing, importantly, reusables as well, so that we've really got that choice, because I think it's so important that we can have that, you know. So this also links to period poverty, because when we think about period poverty, obviously it's something that shouldn't be happening at all anywhere on the planet in 2022. And it causes so many problems for people. Obviously, there's no dignity, and a lot of people miss out on opportunities because they haven't got the products they need. That's why, in addition to doing my campaign, I've also been calling for changes at government and council levels. So many of the councils and governments across the UK are now brilliantly making period products available for people at schools and colleges to use, which is fantastic. But I also thought about the way that this money is going to be spent, because if we've got this funding, we should be spending it in a way that's not only better for the planet, but it's actually better for humans too. So I've campaigned for them to spend their money on eco-friendly products so that they can not only tackle period poverty, but the plastic crisis and protect the environment all at the same time. And I'm really pleased that the Welsh Government have listened, and have stipulated that 50% of the funding across Wales has to be spent on eco-friendly products. That includes reusable products. And 5 councils in Wales have also made the step to 100% of their funding being spent in this way, which I think is such a positive step for them to take. You know, I never thought that they would do something like that. And I'd also like to say, you know, obviously, when I started this campaign, I was an individual. I didn't think I could make a difference at all. I thought that it was only scientists or people with degrees that could do it, but every single one of us can. And that's the fantastic thing about this, that we can all affect change. So there are so many ways that we can have a planet-friendly period. And as you can see on the screen now, there's lots of different choices. So you can have organic pads and tampons, which are made without plastic, and they perform in just the same way, which is fantastic. And a lot of people as well don't think about the plastic in tampons. A lot of people think it's just the applicator. But if you can see here, even with this tampon, which obviously is a mainstream brand, you've got these bits at the edge, which are just here if you can see them. And that's actually made of polyester. So around 6% of a tampon can be made of plastic. So by switching to brands and eco-friendly products like this, it's helping the environment, but it's also helping us. There's even been research out very recently that shows that every time you use a tampon, about 17 billion nanoplastics can be released, and that includes nanoplastic particles if the product has plastic in it, which is quite concerning, obviously, because we don't know all of the impacts that can have on us. You've then got things like menstrual cups, which are a fantastic option because you use them for up to 10 years and they're really easy to use. I used to use these on my postal round because there's never any access to toilets, unfortunately. You've then got period pads, which are a great alternative to use instead of disposable pads. So these can be used for up to 8 hours, depending on the brand, and then you just wash and reuse them again. And then you've got period pants, which are fast becoming a really popular option. And on the screen, you've also got the reusable applicator, which I just think is fantastic because so many people, as I was talking to you before, a lot of these brands get in from such a young age by giving out free samples. And a lot of those are Tampax products, which have plastic applicators. So we're seeing a lot of a rise in people using those products because a lot of the time they're also on offer. They're the options that are marketed to us the most. So a lot of people end up using them, but an option like this is such a brilliant solution to that as well. So that helps even more people switch to them. So yeah, these really are a fantastic option for all these different things. Did you want to talk about the different options a bit, Fee?
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
I'll do a bit of a deep dive now, coming from a product perspective. So just wanted to kind of talk through these specifically, just because I think it's great, obviously, that there's so many options available, but I think the understanding of these products is what's great about it as well, because when you think about conventional products, the lack of transparency is also so prevalent. We didn't actually know what these products are made of until there's more wider awareness through Ella's campaign and other campaigns, and obviously things we're doing as a brand at TOTM. We actually surveyed 1,000 women at the end of 2021. And we found out that still 50% don't actually know what the products are made of. So I think this is why it's so important with these eco or more sustainable options, is that you can actually have that knowledge as well to know exactly what you're using, which is another really powerful aspect of sustainable period products and the kind of value that they hold. So organic cotton disposables, they have that organic cotton, and if it's truly organic, you'll find it will be organic cotton from the top, so that kind of top layer of the product, through to the core, which is obviously meant to absorb menstrual flow. And they're also not contain any harsh chemicals or irritants, so things like fragrance, surfactants, super absorbents, which are called like super absorbent polymers, which basically are used in conventional pads to artificially or kind of chemically absorb, because the material, obviously plastic, isn't very absorbent. So things like that aren't required in sustainable alternatives, which is great from a planet perspective and also from a well-being perspective, which is great. They also, majority on the organic space, especially speaking to our products, they'll come with cardboard applicators only and paper wrappers, which again is super important because majority of conventional products are coming in plastic wrappers, and considering that they are used for seconds, in terms of you taking out the wrapper, just don't need it anymore, and you're using that on a high volume, those quite quickly become high volume single-use plastics. And then obviously in terms of the materials that you're using, a lot of the organic products will also use compostable components where possible, outside of just pure plastic. So it's great in terms of offering that more positive or reduced impact on the kind of waste and disposal side of things as well. So deep diving on a menstrual cup. So people often see these and feel quite intimidated at first glance, because as you can see by the diagram, it has got that kind of bell shape to it. That is just purely because they collect menstrual flow rather than absorb it. So as a result, they sit lower than a tampon. So you don't have to kind of have that fear of that going, you know, as high as a tampon would. It sits very low. And it actually then, so you basically will fold that in. There's up to 8 different folds you can try, depending on which one you feel comfortable with. And once you found the fold that you'd use, it pops open and catches flow and can be used for up to 8 hours. So you obviously have a longer kind of length of usage, because it's not absorbing, it's not kind of taking any unnecessary fluids or kind of adding anything too high up the vaginal canal. The great thing about these as well is obviously by using it for so long, and by the fact that you can take it out, you can rinse it, you can then reinsert, you can then boil it as well between cycles to sterilize it, keep it, use it again on your period. You don't have to use anything else around it. You can solely use a cup. So it's great from a cost perspective, but also from a waste perspective, because you're not actually sending any products to landfill essentially. And obviously, because they can be kept up to 10 years, that could be your one key period product, which is obviously brilliant. Reusable pants and pads. So again, deep diving on these. So how these kind of work is there's often a kind of a fear around both these products in a similar way of people kind of feeling like, do you feel like you're almost sitting in your menstrual flow, or can you feel that kind of like moisture? But they're layered in their composition. So they have a top layer, which will be like organic cotton, or it could be a bamboo, which is like your gusset kind of layer. And then it'll have some kind of moisture wicking property within that, so you won't feel uncomfortable when it's obviously doing its job and absorbing. And then below that, built into the gusset, it'll have a absorbent layer, which will be some kind of material which is hyperabsorbent, and that will then basically catch most of the flow, so you won't actually feel that against you, if that makes sense. And then what you basically do with those, you can, like Ella said, you can wear them up to 8 hours, you can wear them a lot longer, you can wear them overnight. They're not as kind of needed, they don't have that need to change as regularly as a pad. And then you just pop them in the washing machine or whatever washing facilities you have. Usually they come with washing machine bags, which makes it super convenient. And then you just kind of wash and reuse as needed. And both pants and pads, they come in a range of shapes, a range of styles, a range of colours. So you've got a nice kind of choice as well to kind of make sure you find something that you like at the same time, which is obviously a luxury. I know Ella's already covered this, but I don't know whether you wanted to add anything else in terms of the period dignity side of it, in terms of the research, Ella, or do you want me to talk around it?
Yeah, so I think obviously with a lot of period poverty campaigns, period dignity campaigns, we always think, of course, that the most important thing is that the people that need them have the products they need. But through the work that I've been doing, you know, it's also really important from my perspective that everyone, no matter their background, who they are, where they are, that they get the choice from having all of these different options in front of them, so that they can truly pick something that's right for them rather than having a choice forced onto them, you know. So that's really important. That's why I feel that tackling period poverty with eco-friendly products and sustainable choices is even more inclusive, because you've got such a wide range of variety that you can choose from. So that's what I would say.
And just from what you were saying earlier as well, just from the, especially within the Welsh government side of things, but even some kind of local councils throughout different parts of the UK, the kind of campaigning that Ella's been doing in order to get this kind of more eco approach to addressing period dignity grants or access within those areas, we as a brand are actually supplying those areas. And so it's great to see that it is actually following through, if that makes sense. Like, it's not just kind of a conversation between Ella and the decision makers. It is actually to the point where now you can access menstrual cups as well as organic pads or reusable period pads in these kind of different areas that are obviously supplying it. So there is that, obviously, that continuation as well.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that they've been doing that, because also it means that this money is being spent on independent brands that are pushing for so much more change than those that are so resistant at the top. So by this money being spent in this way, it's also being spent in a way that's truly ethical, because we know where the products are coming from. We're asking those questions, and a lot of those councils and governments are now starting to, the ones that have changed, are starting to think about more questions. You know, where has this been made? How are the workers treated? It's going even beyond the environment now, which is so important. You know, we need to be asking these questions. We can't just walk into this funding by the first person that waves their hand and gives you the best deal. There's got to be so much more thought about this kind of funding than that. And that's what I love about it, is that there's so much positivity and changes being made. I know that we've spoken about the fantastic work that the Welsh Government is making. In England, there's a different scheme which is being done, and you can access eco-friendly products through that as well. So if you work at a college or a school, or you know someone that attends one, it would be a really great idea for them, if they want to push for that funding to be spent on those eco-friendly options that are available, because we can all affect change in different ways, and that's one way that we can do it.
So should I leave it to you to rattle up the key takeaways?
No, you can do it, that's fine.
I'll go. So basically, the point that obviously comes throughout all of this is that every single one of us can make a difference. And it's all about finding what works for you as well. I think one thing that we maybe didn't touch on as such, but when it comes to these products, you still need to keep that approach of, it's your period. You know, don't feel under pressure to use products that you don't feel comfortable with. It's all about keeping that at the forefront, but finding out what works for you. And obviously, hopefully through broader access, these products will be more available, or like widely available. So you can obviously have access, everybody can have access and try out different things as well. But our kind of top 3 points that we've got is that period plastic is a problem. On average, we generate 200,000 tonnes of waste from menstrual products each year in the UK alone. And obviously, conventional products containing up to 90% plastic make that a lot of plastic waste. Obviously, Ella's and period plastic campaigns launched to raise awareness of this issue and primarily encourage supermarkets and manufacturers to change, which had a huge impact on the industry. It's meant that products are more widely available now in supermarkets, but also on the manufacturing end, there have been significant changes in terms of stopping the production of plastic tampon applicators, and kind of feeling that pressure from the consumers signing the survey to actively, you know, think, okay, we need to change. And obviously there are more. Takeaway 2, there is more sustainable alternatives available. It's not like how it was years ago when it was like, what are the options? There's really limited options. They're not very performance focused. I don't really know where to find them. It's just absolutely booming as a space. There's so many options in all different kind of, you know, absorbencies and menstrual cups in different shapes and sizes and all sorts. But again, going back to what I was saying earlier, just all about finding what works for you. And our third key takeaway is just that accessibility is key. So supermarkets is one side of accessibility, because it's, nobody wants to have to go and hunt down these products to try and figure out how they shop them. It's so much easier if you're in a supermarket already, or if you're in a shop that you regularly shop in, to be able to see it and to have a look at it and shop it with convenience. But also obviously from the period dignity side of things, hopefully now with governments being on board already, through the conversations that Ella's been having, but also through hopefully some of the pressure and conversations that have gone on more recently around period dignity and the situation in a COVID world, where obviously it's only needs even more support at the moment, then hopefully then that will truly make them even more accessible, so that sustainable period care could be more widely adopted, and we can reduce the impact that this industry has on the planet. That takes us to a Q&A.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think that was hopefully really helpful for everyone and giving a really good overview of all the different alternatives there are out there, but also I think some pretty striking like statistics about the impact of particularly some of the more like readily available period products and like the actual difference it can make from switching away from those. I can see we've got a hand up already. So, Lloyd, do you want to ask your question?
Hello. See, you guys don't know me very well in this forum, but I'm known for putting my hand up quickly. So I'll be attending other meetings. You'll get used to me. Sorry. I do have a question, and it is basically the paradigm that's illustrated here can be used broadly, can't it? Because I would imagine this is the same issue with disposable diapers or nappies. It's the same issue with a lot. I mean, I can't buy any fruit or vegetable that isn't wrapped in plastic. I mean, we can take this same business model and apply it broadly, can't we?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for me, for some reason I chose period products and that was my thing. But if you walk into any supermarket, any retail space, you start to see how many issues there are. I mean, this is a sustainability talk, so you've probably been learning about so many different things, but when your mind is in that space, you become aware of all the marketing, everything that's happening, and you see all the different issues with various products. So yeah, it can be done with anything. If you have the passion and you have that persistence, you really can bring about huge changes. And I think there's such a brilliant opportunity to really push and pressure retail, especially with this, because they're very receptive to what you speak to them about. They've been the ones that have changed the most in my experience.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and thanks, Ella, for that answer. That was something that I was gonna ask about actually, because obviously today, like we've been specifically talking about period products, and you've obviously done like a great campaign that has made like a world of difference, and like you can kind of see, I think, going into shops now a lot, there's so many more options compared to what there was even like a year ago or something. So when we are kind of thinking about, I'm thinking particularly when you are going into shops, things like fruit and veg, which don't need any plastic packaging, but obviously are mainly all covered in it. Would you have any tips for anyone that wants to do kind of similar work, but thinking about any other kind of products out there? And how did you kind of get started?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, I got started by getting really frustrated about the problem and not really knowing what I could do about it at the time, but seeing petitions, as I mentioned before, made me think about how I could affect change in that way. So one really big thing for me at the start was finding the science to really back up my argument for why this needs to change. So it was things like how much plastic they contain, how long they're taking to break down, you know, where they're ending up, how much of a massive issue this is, and how that needs to be changed at source with these brands, and to really hold them accountable. So for me, I'd definitely say find people around you that are also passionate about sustainability. Maybe have some discussions on problems that you've seen and find one that you're all passionate about and align behind an argument and start to build it from that. Think about who your decision makers are. So for me, at the start, I was thinking, do I need to go to the government for this? Do I need to do legislation? But legislation takes so long to change, and I had no idea politically what to do. So for me, the decision makers were the supermarkets and the supermarkets and the manufacturers, because for me that was the quickest way I could affect change and really make a difference. So yeah, you have to think about who, and also the different avenues that you can make change as well. So obviously, to start with, I was thinking, right, we need to get different options into supermarkets. So that's my first call to action for them. And then my second is for them to change their own brands, to really make solutions within their own ranges and make changes there. So those were two, but then also the opportunity arose with the period poverty funding and making sure that that was being spent in a way that is positive for people and the planet. You can also think about different ways of raising awareness, the different platforms you use. Social media has been integral to my campaign. You know, it wouldn't be anywhere near what it would be now without that. And most importantly, I'd say get creative with it, because we see so much online, but if you get creative and show through different medium how this issue. So for example, I created a giant applicator with the help of my mum to not, I know why, you think why, but you know, you walk past one or two on a beach and people don't really think much about it, but when you've got one that's 6 foot tall and made from 1,200 applicators, it's hard to ignore. So it's thinking outside the box of ways that you can add even more noise to your argument and really pressure these brands to do it. And, you know, use examples as well of who's doing it right and how these brands can change in the right way. And what's really important as well is being open to working collaboratively with them. You know, a lot of these brands in the first year, they didn't engage with me at all. They were sending me long emails and excuses. They probably thought that I'd go away, but unfortunately for them, I didn't. And obviously the pressure of the campaign brought them to the table. But a lot of them thought I would just shout at them in a meeting room, because that's what they thought I was like, you know, an activist. You're not sure, they're not sure of what they're going to get. So that's why it's important to be open with them on the table. And it's important to let your frustration out in tackling these problems, but really be open to talking to them about how they can change, and ask these questions as well, because a lot of us assume, or at least I did assume when I was younger, companies and adults will be making the right choices for us and the planet. Unfortunately, that's not true, as many of us know. So we have to be asking these questions and we have to be pushing for change. And the only way we can do it is if we take action. And that's why it's so important. It doesn't matter who you are. If you've got that passion and you've got that drive to do something, you can do it. And we need all these different perspectives. You know, my lived experience is different to someone else's lived experience, and they'll see issues that I don't see. So it's important for them also, everyone, to bring this into their own lives, into their workspaces. You know, bring your passion for the environment into everywhere you go.
I was just going to say, just to add to that as well, because I'm not sure whether we should have got a picture of it in our slides, but Ella, obviously when you were saying about you representing all different people, you actually kind of had a way of like delivering the petition in a sense, didn't you, to the at one stage? And I thought that was really powerful, because it kind of had this like visual element of like, it was almost like the voice of like all these people. And you kind of gave it this thing of like, this is the view, loads of people, you need to listen, basically. So I thought that was powerful.
Yeah, it's important to get as much support as you can, and also think about who you can get that support from. Who are your allies in this conversation? So, for example, for me with period plastic, my allies are marine conservation groups, they're beach cleaners, people that use water leisurely, you know, rowers, people who go out on paddle boarding, all these kind of people that use these spaces, people that menstruate. There's so many that you can find, but it's important to have like pillars of who can support you, and ask for them to then get involved with your campaign as you grow it. So it's like you've got all these different strands and you're plaiting it together. It really helps to make it as strong as it can be.
Thank you. That's a really good answer. I think particularly that last point is quite interesting. I think thinking about the different groups, that you won't necessarily, if you immediately think about this sort of cause, you're not going to immediately make those links and be like, this is who I need to get on side. But yeah, think creatively.
Yeah, definitely. And there's people that you won't think, like you say, to start with, that would be on board with it. Or, you know, I've heard a lot, well, this isn't a man's problem, why, like, shouldn't it just be a women's issue? And it's like, well, if you use these products either indirectly or directly, you're affected by it. It's affecting the planet, it's affecting the people in your life, affects everybody. So it's really important to get as many people involved. And also, in contrast to that, there'll be people that just really don't care, unfortunately. And as much as you try to get them on board, they won't listen. So if you do get negative comments about things as well, don't take it to heart and just try and move forward in the way that you know you can, because there's no point in wasting time on them. They've got that view and they're just not going to change.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point as well. I think things like this, you're always gonna, and anything, I think in the like environmental sustainability area, it's always going to split opinion. You're always going to have some people that care a lot, some people that don't care, and some people that might actively dislike something. So I think finding those positive voices and making the most of them is definitely an important approach. We've got Loy back again with another question.
You were warned. Okay. You kind of did already touch on the question that I had, and that is how much of this was gender politics, in the sense that when you're talking about period plastics, were you approaching a room full of men? How diverse were these companies, and do you think it made a difference in your resistance at all?
That's a really interesting question, because it's something that a lot of people assume is a very male dominated area. Fortunately for me, when I was having those conversations and when I've had these meetings with these decision makers in boardrooms, there's been a lot of women, but interestingly, or maybe not, the best conversations I've had are when men have been present, when men have been able to be part of the conversation. And that's so important that they are, that it's from a range of people being in those meetings. You know, I think that's the best way to have these conversations and to open up all these different issues that a lot of men don't even know about. And I think that's one of the greatest problems with period education in the UK, is that boys are not included in those conversations, and obviously that leads to a lot of negative behavior around periods and conversations and all this sort of stuff. And the way that we can change that is by involving men, because a lot of men also, and it's not their fault, don't think that they should talk to women about their periods, because it's always been something that they've been excluded from. They've always been excluded from the conversation. So if you're having conversations at school, you're excluding boys, it's only going to lead to them feeling like they can't speak about it to their partners, to their siblings, all these sort of things. And it only has a bad, it can only be bad when that continues. Like, for example, I've had managers who in my past jobs who I've not felt comfortable to talk to periods about, and I've instead said, I can't come into work today because I've got a stomach bug, or I'd rather say that I'm going to the toilet every half an hour than say that I've got my period. So it just shows that there's all these things that are so hammered into us from a young age. You know, like I was told we can hide these products in our pencil cases and no one will know we're on our period. And it just has so many, it's just not good. So I think in the same sense with councils that I've met, there's been a lot of men in the position of how, in the decision making point of how to spend this money, and they don't know what the different products are. They don't find out what the different products are, and they just spend it on the first option there is. And of course, that's Tampax and Always. So that's why it's even more important for men to be involved with it, and for there to be a need for everyone to be involved with that funding, like men and women.
Just going to say, I feel like we're almost floating towards it. There's just the stigma in general, isn't it? I think the fact that the industry has remained so unchanged for decades is due to how these just aren't conversations that are widely normalized, which means that it kind of buries the problem. It does literally push it right to the bottom, and that's why period plastics is one side of it. The awareness of ingredients, as you touched on, Ella, period dignity in the workplace and the menstrual well-being in the workplace. We've actually just run a survey, and in that survey, I think it was 70% of the people who responded said that they'd been caught short by periods at work. 90% said they'd suffered with period pains and didn't feel like they could speak to anybody. It's just, it really paints a picture of equality, issues with inequality, and also just means that there's so many issues from classrooms to workplaces, and it all goes back to, like you said, that education side of it. If there is a lot of education awareness, and if there is a stigma, there's loads of myths, there's loads of misconceptions, there's loads of strange attitudes and negative attitudes towards menstruation then, and it just starts to spiral. And that's where it all kind of comes from. So it's great that you're obviously doing it from a direct angle in terms of having the conversations with with different people in all different kind of areas. I think it goes back to really making sure that this is kind of brought into the menstrual education in schools, and then obviously the conversation itself is more broadly available.
Yeah, it really needs to be inclusive. 100%. It needs to be inclusive, and it needs to include all of these different issues with periods. I've gone to different people and they've said, well, we don't want to tell young people what to use. But the thing is, with the education as it is, you are already telling people what to use because you're giving them Tampax and Always. So by having education that includes eco-friendly disposables, menstrual cups, pads, pants, and reusable tampon applicators, there's so much more choice than just the one choice that they've got now. So it's more inclusive. So I sometimes think that there's a lot of, sometimes they don't want to say anything because it's such a touchy issue. I've even approached some of the European Commission about something, the fact that they're tackling a lot of the highest plastic products that are found on beaches, yet they're not tackling number 5. They're doing things across the 10 but not number 5, which is period products, and it's always ignored. And this is the problem. We need to be tackling it. You can't ignore it, because if we continue to ignore it, there's going to be further problems downstream. And it's just got to be done in the right way. And it needs a lot of research to start with, but it would make periods so much more positive if they did act on it.
It's funny you said that. I just thought then in my head, just as an interesting little anecdote, there was a water kind of company that was doing a radio ad around like things not to flush, and I was listening in the car thinking, going to talk about period care, this is interesting, and it wasn't mentioned. And I thought that was really interesting because it was on like mainstream radio. It was like one of like the UK's biggest channels, and it was talking about nappies and talking about, and it wasn't mentioned. I thought that was really interesting because, like you said, it's almost like skirting around because it's like we don't talk about that. It's like skirt around it, which is so interesting.
It's so bad, isn't it? It's so bad because it's such a big problem, but it's just constantly trying to be pushed under the carpet.
I think that's so true. And I didn't even realise, I think, until we've started having this conversation about quite how prevalent like period products are in terms of like pollution for oceans and beaches, things like that. It's not something that you hear about like straws, and obviously there's been loads of stuff around moving away from just plastic straws, but this isn't something that's ever really come up, which, like you say, it's just something that's been completely skirted around, which, given that it is so high up on that list, it's crazy that people just aren't really talking about it. Ultimately, obviously, if you don't have these conversations and you're like not talking about something, then nothing can change, really. It's wild.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to say something, and it's so important to use your voice for what you're passionate about, because if you don't, it's a missed opportunity, you know. I think that's why when I found out about this problem right at the start 4 years ago, almost to the day, I just couldn't stop thinking about it, because everyone was talking about all these other things, but no one was discussing this massive problem, this hidden plastic that's just hidden in plain sight. But they were acting on other things, and I felt such a sense of responsibility to do something that I couldn't ignore it anymore, and I couldn't not do something. It was only about what I could do and I had power to do.
And I love that, because it shows about consumer power, doesn't it? It's like we have so much power as consumers that we often forget to like unlock.
Yeah,
If
definitely.
people stop buying something, then it'll eventually get through to the boardroom of whatever company, because they're looking at the profits. So.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if they don't change for the benefit of the planet and the people, having that money not going to them is going to make them change.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of this is a game of monopoly, you know, how much money they can get. So you have to act in a way. You can vote with your money, you can vote for the kind of world that you want by spending money on the right kind of products and the right kind of brands. And that really has a massive impact, or by just stepping away from certain brands and boycotting them because it's not right. You know, we've even seen it in the fashion industry, what's happening. So by really enacting that and living and making your ethics, bringing your ethics into your everyday and talking about it and just breathing it is so important, because a lot of people may think something is wrong, but they might not speak about it. So even having conversations about the plastic in period products and talking to people about that is really important too, because who talks about periods anyway, you know? So talking about all these different things is really powerful, and it can lead to massive change. You know, I didn't think that the changes that have happened would happen, but by thousands of people getting involved and emailing these brands has got them to come to the table, and it's really made a difference.
Yeah, and I think doing something as simple as just changing the like period product you're using, just to make that really small, simple change, like when you're thinking about the impact that that's going to have over a lifetime, like it is massive. And it's not something that, as long as you've kind of done the research, found something that works for you, it's not something that's going to feel like a massive change, but actually does have that really big impact. So I think a really important thing. Do we have any more questions from anybody, either in the chat or if you want to pop your hands up? As we're coming towards the end. One thing that I was interested, I don't know if there is an answer to this, but is there any consensus around which like period products are the most like environmentally friendly or like sustainable, I guess, over like a period of time when you're using them?
Menstrual Cup.
Yeah.
The Menstrual Cup is the most sustainable, because it's made out of one material throughout its whole composition, and it can be kept for years, reused for years, and you technically don't need anything else. Well, it's your choice whether you do use other things. Again, you might want to use things alongside it, but you technically don't need to. So for purely production and zero waste, menstrual cups are are the kind of the holy grail, they say, as the unsustainable period side. But as me and Ella have discussed loads of times, it's just about the fact that, so we actually did a study, and it can take on average 3 menstrual cycles to get used to a cup. So you just need to go in with it, being aware of that, and also be aware that there are different folds and everybody's different. So when we obviously selling cups, and we have DMs of customers where we'll kind of say to them, well, try this fold instead, or try this fold instead, and then they'll say, okay, it's working now, it's not leaking. So it just goes to show there's so many different ways that you can go about it. So you've kind of got to just be aware of that. But if it doesn't work for you, then that's where you know, don't feel under pressure. I think that's one thing me and Ella always talk about quite a lot. It's like you feeling like ashamed of yourself or like mad at yourself because you can't adopt it. You just go for another option.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well, I remember us discussing before that it's sometimes it depends on your shape as well, the shape of you, and what kind of firmness of a cup will work. So the first time I used a menstrual cup, I had one that was quite rigid, I guess would be the way to put it. It wasn't very flexible. I kept finding that it was making me feel like I needed to go to the bathroom all the time, and it was just a bit, I wasn't getting used to it. But when I tried one that was more flexible and made from a material that was more flexible, it worked for me better.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And if you want to know the most used products in terms of what is the most used product in the UK on the non-eco side, it is a mainstream pad. So they're actually the most used products from in the UK. So you can almost see as well why the need for choice is so important, because if you've got most people wearing outerwear, we'll call it. I'm sorry. You know, like an outerwear product. To use an internal menstrual product could be a massive leap. So I think the usable pads have really got a space within that, or the organic cotton pads, because obviously you've got different options there. So yeah,
I think it's really important not to put too much pressure on people to use a certain product, because there can be a lot of conversations around that are like, use this and that's it. And it's like, well, there are so many reasons as to why a certain type of product may not work for somebody, and they shouldn't have to explain that. And also, you can use lots of different products on your period. So I don't always just use one thing. I use multiple different things. I use pants. If, for example, if I'm going to visit my nan and I'm staying over, I wouldn't want to use pants because then I'd have to wash them there, and it's all the kind of logistics of that. So I may use, say, a menstrual cup or disposable products depending on where I am, or if you're somewhere else. It just depends what position you're in and what suits you. And I think the greatest thing about it is that sense of like liberation that you feel, because when I stepped away from those brands that I'd been using for so long, I felt really liberated. Like I can try and find something that really suits me, and that's the beauty of it. You can have a lot of fun with it, and you can use different things, and like Fee was saying, it does take a little bit of time to get used to a cup, but if you do it at the weekend or when you're not at work or at uni or something like that, you're more relaxed at home, and then you can then start to use it in your day-to-day, which is really good. I found that worked for me best.
Great, thank you both. Yeah, I think that like flexibility and being able to have choice is such a really important point, and so hopefully something that's been useful for everyone here to hear when we're having this conversation as well. So I'm aware we've got to 4 o'clock now. So unless anybody has any final burning questions, then I will close this here. But Ella and Fee, thank you so much again for joining us today. I think that was covered a lot of ground, and I think a really useful conversation, and probably something that I've certainly learned a lot, and hopefully everybody here has learned a lot and have come away feeling inspired and maybe ready to make a couple of changes, try a few new things and see how it works for them. So thanks so much, and thank you everyone for joining.
Lovely. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. Bye-bye.